Yo! Video games.
What up, dudes? It's Matt here from YoVideogames, and welcome back to our Road to E3 2016 with our memories of the Zelda series. Now, today, we're going to talk about everyone's favorite fucking Zelda game, A Link to the Past on the Super NES. Now, I personally think that A Link to the Past is definitely one of the best games, but I do kind of feel that there's other Zelda games that are about as good as A Link to the Past. But let's not talk about those. Let's just talk about this game. So, we covered the NES Zelda games, and we all know how Zelda 2 was this huge departure. So when it came time to make Zelda 3, which is the game's codename, Zelda A Link to the Past, or Triforce of the Gods if you're in Japan, went back to a more roots-like gameplay system from Zelda 1. However, you could definitely see the genesis of what would become a very standard type of Zelda formula within this game. And that is, you get 3 particular story-based items, and you get the Master Sword, and then some other flip version of the world opens up, and then there's about 5 or 6 other new core quest items. See, in Zelda 1, it was like, okay, just get the Triforce, and Zelda 2 was like, put all these crystals inside each temple. And then Link to the Past introduced the element of where the plot kind of begins with Link waking up, which was introduced here. It went through the 3 core items, getting the Master Sword, and then moving on to your next core items, which is about 5 or 6 other core items, and then to finally unlocking or unsealing or doing something to give a pathway open to defeat Ganon. So, Link to the Past is a title, again, it came out in what, 92 in America, and at the time it was still kind of under that Zelda or fantasy embargo. It really was a whole fantasy embargo, really, in my family, so it was hard to actually get a hold of this game, but I did actually get to do it this time. Interestingly enough, we had a group of family friends or church group or whatever youth group thing, and what had happened was during the Super NES era, it basically introduced a sort of trade system mechanic, like the Zelda trading sequence, which wasn't introduced in this game, but it was like that with Super NES games. So basically what happened was that I would trade one game with another family friend who would trade me, their Super NES game, and basically it just kind of like kept shifting around this group of people, and somehow we got a hold of a copy of A Link to the Past, and I fucking loved it. It was wonderful to finally just be able to just sit down and get hands-on, real deep and dirty into a Zelda game. Now, of course, you could say, hey, this is gonna skew my opinion on Zelda games going forward, because it's kind of like your first real big Zelda title, and that's kind of true, but my favorite memory of Link to the Past is actually something I talked about with the Zelda 1 memories, and that is the way in which secrets and mysteries and puzzles had to be explained word of mouth. So what had happened is I had one of my cousins who, lives pretty far away. He was coming out to visit his family on the West Coast, the best coast. And basically what had happened, though, was he was traveling and staying with different relatives at different parts of the best coast, and eventually he was going to stop and stay with us for a week last. Well, the thing was he had beaten Link to the Past, so before he got here, it was really cool because I would call him up and see what I was doing, and then say, hey, I'm stuck in this dungeon, or God, this ice temple's really killing me, like, how do I get this key item in Misery Mire? And that was just so cool because it in a way, Zelda kind of sort of brought me together, or brought me closer to a family relative more than before, which was just something that was really awesome. And again, this is not something that the game was intended to do. It's just sort of a happy memory related to it. And what is related to it is the fact that Zelda used to have this great element of mystery and puzzle solving, and this is why I like puzzles. This is why I like dungeons. Even though I don't really particularly like dank dungeons, and here's my one tiny issue with Link to the Past, and that is the dungeons are sort of color copy paste of each other. Now there's little differences here and there. Sometimes things have a little bit more like garnish or little things on the walls to sort of differentiate them, and then Turtle Rock is all cave based. But yeah, Zelda Link to the Past dungeons are all kind of just tile swaps for the most part. That's not really a knock on the game, it's just they got better over time with that aspect, although they certainly got worse over time. Link to the Past is kind of like this sort of perfect medium where it doesn't overbear you with story. Now, the game definitely has story this time. There is a lot more text in this game. There is more NPC interaction, though strangely, it's still kind of held back in a way. Like, there's definitely dialogue at the beginning of the game, but you can kind of play this game and really the only time you have to talk to people is within the first hour or two. After that, like, you hardly ever speak to anyone if you don't want to in the game. The opening's very quick. You basically wake up and boom, you're out in the rain. You're sneaking into castles, and it's just like it's boom, go, go, go. It's definitely something that I understand why people really don't like other games in the series where they got real long-winded in their tutorials. I can kind of appreciate the sort of like, get engrossed in your setting, but let's be honest, Link to the Past probably had it done better, where it's just like, you know what, you get a little bit of an intro. If you want more story, the story's in the instruction manuals. And there's another thing. Zelda Link to the Past has a great instruction manual that's horribly mistranslated and shit kind of added just at random and for fucking fun by the localization team at the time. But it was still cool, and it was still something that I remember vividly. Like the early copies of Zelda Link to the Past, and I have one of these, has a fold-out map of Hyrule, and God, that is really cool. And it has a thick instruction manual, and the story in the instruction manual was the first thing done by Yoshiaki Koizumi, who is one of the greatest developers in Nintendo history, and his first gig at Nintendo was writing the backstory to the Zelda mythos. The guy who basically canonized or created the core canon of Zelda that we all love started here in Link to the Past and in an instruction manual, which I really feel bad for you guys who were born way too late to appreciate instruction manuals. They were really fucking awesome. They were really things that helped spark your imagination and make games seem like more than they were at the time, and that's kind of like a lost art now. And God, if you ever can get a boxed copy with instructions for Link to the Past, it's a real treat. I really encourage you to do that if you're a collector of any sort. And if you already have it, that's cool too. So yeah, Link to the Past is great because it really starts the whole general Zelda mythos that, kind of got all fucked up with Skyward Sword and that hack fucking fraud from Flagship and Capcom who took over. But let's not talk about that game. Fuck Skyward Sword. I don't like it. I will say this though, I remember vividly beating the game, and the two things about the ending that I vividly remember is that, one, I thought it was the coolest fucking thing ever with the soundtrack because it basically played the same really cool melody over the ending, but with different instrumentation, which in video games, totally had not seen that before, not personally. It was really incredible at the time. I thought it was the coolest fucking thing ever. Koji Kondo really put that Sony sound processor to real good use in the ending of this game. And the other thing I remember is that, boy, they will never, ever make a better game than this. This is the best game ever. There's never going to be a game that's going to top this. Is kind of how I felt once I had just beaten Link to the Past, and maybe I was kind of right, but at the same time, I don't think that's entirely accurate, and I'm kind of glad it's not entirely accurate because, man, that would really suck if the best game ever came out in '92. Like, the top of video games was reached, here, some 20-some-odd years ago. That would kind of suck. So I'm glad that I was able to play other games that were at least as good as Link to the Past. Strangely enough, they turned out to mostly be Zelda games. Anyways, those are my memories of Link to the Past. Feel free to tell me your memories of Link to the Past in the comments below and why it's your favorite, or maybe why you don't think it's your favorite. Maybe you're some crazy lunatic like Kyle Bossman who doesn't think Link to the Past is one of the best games ever made. I don't know. Let me know in the comments below, and I'll catch you on the channel. Later, dudes!